Hey everyone. Thank you for joining us for the next session of our Ask the Expert Fabric Edition series. My name is Anna. I'm a producer for this session, joining you from Redmond, Washington. Before we begin, I do have some quick housekeeping. Please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We seek to provide a respectful environment for both our audience and presenters. While we absolutely encourage engagement in the chat, we ask that you please remain mindful of your commentary, professional, and on topic. Keep an eye on that chat. We'll be dropping helpful links and checking for questions for our presenters to answer live. Our session is being recorded. It will be available to view on demand right here on the Reactor YouTube channel. With that, I'd love to turn it over to our presenter for today. Killian, thanks so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Ask the Expert session on Microsoft OneLake. This is really your chance to get all of your OneLake related questions answered. My name is Killian Mitchell, as Anna just said. Here, let's bring up the next slide. I'm a product marketing manager here at Microsoft, focused on the Fabric platform. I'll be hosting today's event, but we also have a whole panel of experts here from the OneLake team: Josh, Elizabeth, Aaron, Tom, who will be joining us relatively soon. They can intro themselves and start answering all of your questions. But first, I want to spend the first 5 to 10 minutes just giving an overview of OneLake, give some time for people to join, but also give you an idea of all the different tools we have in OneLake to help you unify your data estate and help everyone in your organization actually discover and govern that data as well. Then after we set that groundwork, again, only for the first 5 to 10 minutes, we'll bring back on our panel of experts who will answer all of your questions, both in the chat and live. So we have that panel of experts. We also have people in the chat too who can answer your questions. We have, I think, 7 people overall. So tons of people here, just here to answer your questions. So now's the time. Start putting your questions in the chat now or at any point while I'm talking. We'll go in ascending order. So the quicker you put in your questions, the faster your questions will be answered. So I recommend doing it as soon as possible. But yeah, just start putting in the chat whenever you can. But I want to start off this context setting with something that we're all fairly familiar with, right? Which is that vast data landscape that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Most organizations that we work with and that I talk to have tens or hundreds of different team-specific data tools that they're using, and somehow you have to stitch them all together yourself, which often leads to a lot of data sprawl, right? Data duplication, access issues, and even data exposure risks when people kind of do backdoor ways to stitch together their data, which all of which just makes it hard for data teams and those end users, business users, to access, to find, to use all the data that they should be using, right, to unlock those insights. So instead of creating the patchwork of data marts that we often see, which is like scattered across different departments, we are trying to provide you with a single unified access point for all your data. And that's kind of where Microsoft OneLake comes in. If my slide will work, there we go. So OneLake is designed to help you access your entire multi-cloud data estate from a single data lake, which spans the entire organization. I like to think of it similar to how OneDrive is wired into all your different M365 applications and provides that convenient storage location for all your files. OneLake works very similarly, right? Similar to how, say, if you're working on Word or PowerPoint, that data is stored in OneDrive, or that files is stored in OneDrive. OneLake is very similar. It acts as that central accessible location for all of your data. And whether you're working in Spark and Fabric or T-SQL, all of that data is in OneLake. Or even if you're working in other data tools like Snowflake or AI Foundry, you can still use data from OneLake. So it's kind of that OneDrive for your data. And when you think about OneLake, it's often helpful to think about it in these 3 areas. First is how OneLake can help you break down your different data silos, connect to all your data sources with things like shortcuts and mirroring, and help you establish a well-organized data estate with things like domains. Second is how OneLake can help you reduce that data sprawl that you might have, avoid the vendor lock-in, and it does that because it is built on open data formats we now support both Delta Lake and Iceberg, and that open data format also allows you to use a single copy across multiple data engines. So again, whether you're working Spark, SQL, all of that data that you're working from is a single copy, which really helps reduce data duplication. And then third is, then we talk about kind of the OneLake catalog and OneLake security and how you can make sure your data is not only discoverable for all your users, but it's secure and governed at the same time, right? Like we want to foster that data culture, but at the same time, we also want to make sure we're not exposing our data. So I want to start out by talking about shortcuts and mirroring, both of which are zero copy, zero ETL ways to bring your data into OneLake. Shortcuts enable your team to virtualize your data in OneLake without necessarily having to move or duplicate it. Essentially, it kind of acts as that metadata pointer, similar to, say, a desktop shortcut. It's kind of partly why we named it that. It's a helpful connection. And shortcuts are really helpful at breaking down those silos between your data estates. So if you have data in AWS or Google, it can break down those silos without copying that data. But also, even if you have different domains in OneLake, you can still shortcut your data. So if you're working in a warehouse and you want to bring that data into a lakehouse, you can just shortcut that data, again, without moving it and duplicating it. And so you don't have to run into issues with out-of-date data or data copies everywhere. And then we have mirroring, which is very similar to shortcuts, but it's for kind of proprietary databases and data warehouses that you want to bring into OneLake. And again, it provides that no ETL experience. Kind of depending on the data source, it either works just like a shortcut where it just kind of copies in that metadata, or in some cases, it will replicate the entire database. But either way, it keeps everything up to date in real time in OneLake. And last week, if you didn't hear, we had an event called FabCon in Vienna. FabCon is we have now one in the US, one in Europe every year, where we bring in everybody together to talk about Fabric, to learn about the newest announcements. If you're not going to FabCon, I highly recommend that you do. But at that event last week, we announced a bunch of different new sources for shortcuts and mirroring. So we now have Oracle, DB, Google BigQuery, both new mirroring sources in public preview. We also GA'd a few different sources like blob storage, SQL MI, and then actually a month previous to FabCon, we also GA'd Databricks Unity Catalog as well. So a ton of new sources that we're bringing. We're always working to bring in more sources as well. And we can talk about shortcuts and mirroring a little bit too in the questions portion. But once you bring in that data to OneLake, you also then only need to load that data once, right? This is pretty massive again for making sure that you don't have data duplication issues. All of the Fabric engines can operate on that same data without necessarily having to separately ingest it. And having only one copy also means that all your different teams can collaborate on a single source of truth rather than fragmenting that copy at each stage of the analytics journey. And part of how we enable one copy is that OneLake supports open data formats. And specifically, it supports both the Delta Lake format and the Iceberg format, which means if you're a Snowflake customer, for example, we support bidirectional interoperability with Snowflake. So you can create and manage Iceberg tables in OneLake and access them both from Snowflake and Fabric engines without having to move or duplicate the data, which is really exciting, right? Like, so if you bring your data into OneLake, you can be working on the Fabric engines, or you can be working on the Snowflake engines, just depending on your use case. So it kind of opens up the world to both possibilities, because we know a lot of customers, like, they don't just choose one data platform. Oftentimes they have many data platforms, but you still don't want your data to be copied in multiple places. So we're trying to make that possible now. Shifting gears a little bit, because again, I want to spend most of the time on questions. I want to talk about a little bit about how you make your data accessible in OneLake. And mostly that is through the OneLake catalog. It's the central place where you can discover, govern, and secure your data. We also have actually some pretty exciting announcements around security and new things in the OneLake catalog. I'll talk more about that in a second. But we've embedded the OneLake catalog into, I think it's now 100+ applications. Things like Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Excel, AI tools like Copilot Studio and AI Foundry, to make their data as accessible as possible to your AI developers or your business users. And the OneLake catalog is now the most used catalog in the world. So it's a battle-tested catalog. It's used by over 230,000 organizations worldwide. It's the default source of data for 30 million monthly active Power BI users. And the business users who are accessing that data, say from Teams or Excel, they not only get the full search experience that you would get, say, in Fabric, but also security that is defined in Fabric will travel with the data so that people only see what they're supposed to. So, for example, if I'm in Excel, I use the embedded catalog experience, I'd find data. Well, if I don't have access to, say, a credit card column, and somebody has used OneLake Security to put CLS on that column, I still won't have access to it in Excel. Or if I make that lake house highly confidential using Purview information protection, again, that will automatically mean that my Excel file is also highly confidential. So the security that you put on your Fabric items and your OneLake items travels with that data no matter where it's accessed from, which is huge because, again, you want to foster this data culture, but also you want to do it in a secure manner. Also here, we GA'd the Govern tab for OneLake catalog, which is really exciting. We also have a new tab in the OneLake catalog as well for security. So OneLake catalog really now is the central place where you can explore, govern, and secure all your data. But also really exciting, we are rolling out OneLake security into public preview. So highly encourage you to give it a try once it's available in your area. We have Aaron here also from the OneLake security team who will be coming on in a second. So I'm sure he can talk a little bit more about the OneLake security and the rollout process. But it's really exciting because it allows you to define security on folders, rows, columns on your data sources. So again, you can share your data without sharing all of that PII data that might be in it as well. One last slide here on the OneLake security side. We do have a new feature for OneLake security rolling out as well, read-write permissions in Lakehouse. And you can actually sign up for this. I think there's a QR code right here. But it allows you to give viewers selective read-write access to certain folders in your Lakehouse, which will enable them to obviously read or write to that data without having to have a contributor or a higher role in the workspace. So if you're interested in learning more or signing up and using the tool, use this QR code. We'll also put this AKA link in the chat as well. But yeah, definitely, I'll give you a chance to take a picture. Oh, Anna's on top of it already. Already putting that link in the chat. That's awesome. Thank you. All right. With all that context set, I think it's time to just answer some questions. I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet. So again, please put your questions in the chat. Well, we have some sample questions we'll go over. But first, I want to start introducing our panel of experts. So let's bring them onto the screen. All right, Josh, I see you first. You want to give a quick introduction about yourself and your role?
Yeah. Hey, I'm Josh Kaplan. I'm the Director of Product Management for OneLake.
Awesome. Elizabeth, you want to give a quick intro?
Hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth, Product Manager on the OneLake team as well, and have been on many data lake teams at Microsoft for many years. So excited to talk more about all that OneLake can do.
Love it. Aaron?
Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Merrill. I'm a product manager on the OneLake team, and I'm responsible for OneLake security and the new secure tab that Killian was just on.
And then Tom.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Tom Peplow. I'm also a product manager on the OneLake team. Before joining the OneLake team, I used to work in industry playing with data products for a long time. So excited to be here and talk to you all.
Love it. Again, I haven't seen any questions come into the chat yet. Please start putting those questions in there if you have any. But since we just had FabCon Vienna last week, I think maybe we could start out with some of the announcements we have there. One of the ones I was most excited about was around OneLake security. So Aaron, I might ask you to come back off mute to answer some questions. I'm curious, I know we had a bunch of announcements, especially around public preview. Can you talk a little bit more about those announcements and also what that rollout process is going to be like for OneLake security?
Yeah, so we had two main announcements last week. The first was full public preview of OneLake security. So that's in the process of rolling out now. We should be available for everybody in the next week or two. So that means you won't need to sign up anymore to try out the feature. It'll be available on all of your lakehouses, Azure Databricks catalogs as well. And so you can go ahead and just start trying the feature. So you get all the capabilities, object level security, row level security, column level security across all of your different query engines in Fabric. And so that'll be available for you to try. The second announcement was the new Secure tab in the OneLake catalog. So if you either want to understand the different workspace roles that users have across workspaces, you can do that from the Secure tab. Then you can actually manage all of your OneLake security roles from the Secure tab as well. So instead of having to go around each individual lakehouse and manage the permissions there, you have a single place. You can see all of your different OneLake security roles. You can create new roles, you can delete roles, you can edit, update your existing roles all online. So very excited about both of those announcements. And then the private preview for rewrite permission that Killian just mentioned. So please sign up if you're interested in getting that capability, and we'll work on the exact date for when we are enabling the preview will be here in a few weeks. But go ahead and sign up so we make sure you have your interest noted, and we'll contact you with more information.
Awesome. And did you mention how exactly is that rollout process happening? Like if I say I'm in a different region, is it region based or is it time based?
Yes, it should be available everybody pretty much on the same day. We have a couple, I think, early access regions that are already available. But generally it'll just continue to roll out and be enabled for everybody all at once.
Awesome. So glad to hear. All right. I might actually ask you a question, Josh, around Snowflake. I saw we had a pretty exciting announcement and blog talking about Snowflake. Can you talk a little bit more about, say, if I'm a Snowflake customer, how I might, use the interoperability with OneLake and Snowflake to potentially store my data in OneLake, use it in Snowflake, and kind of what that opens up for customers?
Yeah, I mean, there's really three angles to this. Let's say you're working in Fabric, using one of our Fabric engines to produce your data. The engines in Fabric are ways to create data. They're also ways to consume data. But you can consume data not just with Fabric, now you can consume with other engines, including Snowflake. So you have data that's been created within Fabric. You can now sync that with Snowflake. We don't copy any data. It's all working with the same copy of data. But the same tables that you have in Fabric can appear in your Snowflake database, and you can query it directly from there. Again, no data movement, no data duplication there. Now, that's if you're starting within Fabric. Let's say your data is within Snowflake. The reverse is also true. You can shortcut that data in. And one of the things we did with Fabric when we first started is we took a big dependency, all our engines on Delta Lake. Snowflake went the opposite direction, took a big dependency on Iceberg as their file format. Now, to you as a user, it doesn't matter. We handle this under the covers, even though they provide Iceberg and we provide Delta Lake, and our engines know how to read Delta Lake and not Iceberg, and they know how to read Iceberg and not Delta Lake. It doesn't matter to you because we do the translation automatically. So all your data that is created from Snowflake can be made available within Fabric and work with all the Fabric engines. The third option here too is if you are creating new data within Snowflake. Rather than spinning up new storage accounts, managing those yourself, you can also store that data directly within OneLake itself, and use OneLake as your primary store there without having to spin up those other accounts. So all three options are now available. It's really bi-directional data sharing with the added advantage of also being able to store your data natively in OneLake.
Well, and on that note too, I mean, I think some folks might be like kind of wondering what are the top use cases you might use, and I know there's a lot of Snowflake, if not most Snowflake users and customers use Power BI too, right? Power BI is the most used BI platform in the world. you talk a little bit more about some use cases? Like I'm thinking direct lake mode, but I'm sure there's others around. If I'm a Snowflake customer, why I might use this bidirectional integration?
Yeah, so the thinking here is you'll be using a mix of both, right? And you have a lot that you're doing within Fabric, including Power BI. So your Snowflake data can participate with Power BI, with the rest of Fabric, the same way it would if it was just a native Fabric data. So direct link mode is a great way. A great example of a way you can interact with the data directly from Snowflake without copying it, without maintaining an import, without having to recache it. Direct Lake and Power BI works directly off the files in the lake. And now that Snowflake's part of the same lake, it works directly off those files as well too. So no more managing imports, and you can use your data and visualize it immediately with Power BI. And this is true if you want to use your data with Copilot, AI Foundry. The great part about this is you can build this unified data estate, and that can have data from Snowflake, can have data from Fabric, can have data from other places, as you showed on the slide. And then you have one place to consume it from, one place to secure it, one place to govern it, and really facilitates the reuse of that data across not just Fabric, but Microsoft and even outside of Microsoft.
Awesome. And I see we have our first question too, which is really exciting, from Benny Boy. Love the name. And this is for you, Aaron. I've signed up for the private preview from earlier in the presentation, the read write. How early can I expect to hear back?
So I'll send an email kind of in probably 2 weeks. So I'll give everyone a few weeks to sign up. I'll send everyone an email. Everyone who signs up should get access. So we're not generally going to turn people away from the preview. So that's one important thing to note. So yeah, expect a communication in about 2 weeks, letting you know you've been accepted and what the next steps are, along with the documentation on how to get started.
Also, it actually might be helpful to just give a quick overview of how the private preview process kind of works for customers, especially if they're new to it. Just can you give like a quick overview of what to expect when a customer does sign up for private preview stuff?
Yeah, so the way we do our private previews on the OneLake side is we'll go ahead and have everybody sign up. Let us know what what workspaces or tenants to enable. It'll vary slightly on the private preview at what level we can enable that particular feature. Generally, for most of our previews, it'll be either tenant level or workspace level. So you will need the tenant or workspace ID that you're interested in trying that feature on. Once we get all that information, we'll go ahead and pick a date where we start rolling out that feature. And then we'll usually contact you with, here's the documentation for what to actually try in the private preview, along with the workspaces and stuff that we have that we've enabled. And then we just gotta look for feedback. There usually be a form as well. So if you have any feedback or issues, you can contact us, let us know what's working well, what didn't work, so we can work on getting that addressed.
Awesome. And actually, it looks like we have another question too for you, Aaron. I'm not surprised, from Danielle. So can we see the secure tab right now in the OneLake catalog? Is it available right now?
Yes, it's available right now. So it went out globally on Monday. Yes, it's in public preview, so you don't need to sign up for it, but it should be available on everyone's tenant as of days ago.
And then another question here too. Who will be able to edit OneLake Security? That One Security is our old name, but it's sticking around because it's actually pretty good. Do we need to be a tenant admin, and will there be new feature in the tenant level to enable?
No, so you do not need to be a tenant admin to edit OneLake Security. So OneLake Security is set on an individual item within Fabric. So a lakehouse, a Databricks catalog, we're adding your databases soon. So when you'll need to be an admin or member in the workspace where that item lives in order to configure the security for the item. Same with those are the same workspace roles that are required to be able to share an item, so give users access to it. And so they're the ones who can manage the OneLake security setting and opt into the preview as well. So the second part of your question, is there a tenant level switch to enable this? There is not. You just opt into the preview feature on each individual artifact.
Awesome. It might actually be good to do a quick demo of OneLake Security. We have a kind of an overview demo of security, but there's been a ton of new announcements around it. So I think it's a fairly quick demo. And so why don't we give it a play, and then everybody else in the chat, please keep those questions coming as well.
Tracy sent me a message. She needs a new sales report urgently. So I'm going to help her. I'm going to go to OneLake catalog and find my data. Here, I can search by domain. I can explore, but I can also govern all my existing data. And I can have a single place where I can look at all the security of all the artifacts that I have inside of Fabric. In my case, I just want to explore data. I know what I need. I need sales data. So I can filter by all the data types and just use the filters by keyword. So I'm going to use customer sales order, and I can find the lakehouse here. It has the tables I need. I can look at the permissions. And yes, this is it. I'm going to open it up. This brings me to my lakehouse, and immediately we'll notice there's a highly confidential data in here. So we have to be careful. It has 3 tables: city, date, and fact sales, and shortcuts to ADLS. And these shortcuts to ADLS are sitting behind a firewall in Azure, and I'm using Workspace Identity to connect to it. Now, this has a CSV file. That is the data I need. So I'm just going to click load, and it immediately loads that data into my lakehouse. And here we can see it has new data, including credit card information. But my Fabric immediately tells me there's a data protection risk. This is highly confidential data. You have to be careful with this data. Now, to mitigate this risk, I am going to define OneLake security. And I'm going to do 2 things here. I'm going to make sure that Tracy can only see the data that she's allowed to see. So I'm going to restrict the customer details table for her to only see buying group Wingtip Toys. She's only allowed to see Wingtip Toys customers. So I can write some SQL to reduce the rows, as you can see, and I'm going to make sure that she's a member of this role. The next thing is our data engineer, Ben, who needs to do some work here, can see all the data, but he is not allowed to see the credit card information. So I'm defining column level security here and make sure Ben is part of this role. So now that they've created the security in OneLake, I'm going to make sure that nobody can exfiltrate this data somewhere else from Spark. So I'm going to turn on outbound access protection. This will make sure that when we write data out from Spark, it is protected and you cannot circumvent the sensitivity labels. Now, I've done all this work. Now I'm ready to create a report. And with some demo magic, the report is here, but you can see immediately, because we've created this data using direct lake on data in the lake, it automatically travels. The confidentiality label is also here. And because I'm the admin, I have all the rights, right? I can see all the rows. I can see all the customers. Wingtip Toys, Tailspin Toys, all of it, all the entire sales amount, because the one security rule doesn't apply to me. But when I share this back to Tracy on my Teams chat, she's not happy. She wants to get all the data. Well, you're not going to get all the data because it's secured. So when Tracy opens the data directly in Teams, first of all, you will notice the same sensitivity label is being applied here. So you cannot copy the data somewhere else or outside of the organization. It is protected. And the second thing is, you can see that when Tracy opens it up, she only sees the customers from Wingtip Toys, nothing else. But Tracy is crafty. She's smart. She's going to use Copilot to get around this. So she's going to ask me, give me the top customers, hoping Copilot will give her all the customers, not just the ones she's allowed to see. But Copilot is also using OneLake security, and she only sees what she needs. Now, she's going to specifically ask for customers she doesn't have access to. And here again, OneLake security kicks in. She's not able to get to any of the data here, and it doesn't work. But Tracy has friends. Tracy is going to ask Ben, our data engineer, to do this. Ben can write code, so he can do anything. So he's writing select star from this table, and immediately we will see no credit card information is showing up here because Ben didn't have access to it. Well, he's going to try anyway because he can write code, right? He's going to specifically ask for this column. He says, give me the credit card information from this table. And he's going to execute this query because, again, he's a data engineer. He can write code. But again, here we'll see OneLake security is protecting us from him being able to have access to this data. So it doesn't work. Ben has one more trick up his sleeve. He's going to use Spark because, again, he's a data engineer. He can also write Spark. So he's going to write all this data to a data frame. And again, here we'll see even with Spark, he doesn't get the columns that he wants. Now, here's one more thing that he thought of, like, okay, If I'm going to circumvent all the sensitivity labels, I want to write this data out to an S3 bucket outside. And then I can give the data to Tracy. And we can see here it fails. And it fails because we turn on this outbound access protection on the workspace. Now, the last thing that Tracy says that we need to go try is use Excel, because this always works, right? So here, again, he's using OneLake catalog to find the data, going back to my customer sales analysis table, and he's happy to see this workspace has no sensitivity label, so she can just copy it anywhere, right? That's great. So she connects to that, or he connects to this pivot table, but again, the sensitivity label is being applied here. So you cannot do anything with this data outside of the organization. But we see the credit card number here, and Ben is going to try to get to this data. He clicks on it, and also in Excel, this fails. He's unable to access this data in Excel too. So OneLake security is being supplied here too.
All right, that was a pretty good overview of how OneLake security kind of flows, not just in Fabric, but also to external applications as well. I do see we have a question from Vishnu, and I want to get to that. So his question is, I have a customer who has an EDU data in Snowflake, and we have a lot of issues dealing with adding Snowflake as a knowledge base with Copilot Studio. How can I get those data to Fabric and then use? So how can I use the kind of bidirectional integration we have both with Snowflake, but also Copilot Studio? And Josh, I might give this one to you, or anybody else who is, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, happy to take it. Yeah, you can certainly add OneLake as the knowledge base there within Copilot. And you can also do the Fabric data agents directly, so you can build that on top of your data within OneLake and then use that within Copilot Studio. To get the data into OneLake, you have a couple options. So if your data, depends on how your data is stored within Snowflake, if you're using kind of the Snowflake native storage, you can just set up mirroring, and that will do kind of a zero copy replication of that data into OneLake. It's fully managed. And if you're using Iceberg, which is their open file form, which is the open file format that we both share, then you can do shortcuts directly and not have to worry about any kind of replication there. Both will give you the same outcome. You'll be able to use those within Foundry, within Copilot Studio. Now, there's connecting these sources directly from Snowflake, which is essentially what you do if you put it in OneLake and then just connect it. That'll work. The real value then of putting it in OneLake is also then unifying it with other data that's in OneLake. So you'll have other data sources in there, you'll have other Fabric sources in there, and be able to actually combine that data together without duplicating it, and use that as your knowledge base is really powerful.
Awesome, love it. Yeah, I think, Vishnu, you're touching on a really good use case too for OneLake moving forward. Like that is what we're designing it to be, is like that central place where you can keep all your data and then bring it to any other products that you're using. All right, question from Benny Boy on the security piece. How do you get around multiple users looking at the same report and not realizing they're looking at different numbers from different contexts? I could see users getting confused by this. So Aaron, another security question for you,
Yeah,
and then
so
we'll
I can
bring in
take a
Tom
first
and
stab at
Elizabeth
this, and then I'll have Tom can kind of sanity check my answer. So basically, this is a question around not necessarily the security of the data, but how you're actually aggregating your data in general. So let's say you have a sales team and they need to see a bunch of different data. You might need to see their sales information, let's say specific regions where you have row level security or something like that. Then you have like some parent number, like how many customers do we have at the entire organization? There's a couple things you can do. One is you can set OneLake security on those tables separately. So you can have, here's your actual sales table that has RLS on it, limiting what those users can see. And yes, the aggregations will be different for each user, but that's okay because you only want them to see their specific revenue. If you want to have, let's say, a little card at the top that's, here's the entire revenue for this particular group or account of customers or something like that, one thing you can do is actually just have a separate table that has that aggregation already calculated in it. So then it doesn't matter what those users see. Here's my table of aggregates. It's aggregated up, so you don't have to worry about the security of the underlying rows themselves, but then everyone will see that same parent number when they're accessing the data. So that's kind of the way I would look at it.
But it is possible different users can see different things. And
Yes.
More of a
Sometimes it's
feature
expected.
than a
Yes.
workaround.
Yeah, Tom, anything to add there? Are you good?
Well, I think like how Aaron explained it is good. It's part of the report design to think through like what do you want people to be able to see, and people do have different contexts. They look at the job through a different lens, so it might be different people in different regions or different people in different roles. They want to see some information. Then all might be able to see the top line revenue of a company, but they might not be able to see the P&L. They might be able to see their part of the P&L, but not the whole thing. So I think, yeah, I mean, it's part of that design of how you build the analytics and how you bring it to bear. But I think the underlying premise of not being able to make a mistake, it's easy to make mistakes, it's hard to get things right. But if you can get the security right at the data and then it perforates through, then at least a mistake is not like a big mistake. It's just like a report was hard to use. It's not a user didn't see information they weren't meant to see. So I think it's a good balance on the whole. But yeah, that's why Power BI is a great tool and you can build great reports with it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Bem, I see your question, but before we get to that, just while we're on the topic of security, OneLake Security, very powerful for kind of managing the security of your data and sharing it. But also, if you're connecting to data, we do have a number of network security features you could use. And Elizabeth, I might turn this over to you. Like, how do you think about network security? Maybe the kind of recent announcements we had last week, but just when connecting to data, when using shortcuts, mirroring, and other different connecting sources, what kind of security do we have both at the tenant level and workspace level?
Yeah, there's been a lot of recent improvements around security and protecting your data that you have either stored directly in OneLake or virtualized into OneLake as well, because you'll want to protect it at your network layer. Like you saw in the demo you played, you can now enable this outbound access protection to make sure that your data isn't going to be copied outside of your workspace boundary as well. And around private links, being able to secure inbound network as well as a new workspace level control that was just added. So all of these are really bringing in all of the, the main functionality for protecting your data in OneLake so that you can, have the, all the compliance and security requirements that you would need to run your enterprise on top of OneLake as well. And there's also a new feature that we talked about at FabCon around being able to see who's been accessing your data and reading your data. So I think that's one of our great new features. And so maybe Tom, if you don't mind doing a quick little summary of that.
Yeah, I can do that. It's great now that you can have all the information in one place, right? And it's not just physically in one place. It could be all over the place through shortcuts. So data coming in through Snowflake and mirrored data through Oracle and all these other places, but it all lands in OneLake and then it's all secured through one security and all accessible through OneLake catalog. So you can now find everything. But another side of that is being able to see who's using that data. And because every engine loads its data through OneLake, sometimes it doesn't, like Power BI with in other modes won't do it. But if it's in Direct Lake Make, it will read through OneLake. So every engine reading that information that's coming in from all these places is now going through one place. And that what OneLake Diagnostics surfaces up is all the interactions from all the engines and all the users using the data, whether they're inside of Fabric or outside of Fabric. You now get insight into what they're doing. So you can use that for a range of use cases, from looking at how valuable your data products are and who's using them, to security and governance scenarios where you need to be able to check that the right people are looking at things, or even checking you configured OneLake security properly. So it's really just to unify that diagnostics experience across all of your engines so that you can simplify how you can keep an eye on what people are doing with your data products. And it's pretty easy to set up. You just configure it on a workspace and you store it where to store that data in a lakehouse. And that lakehouse is full of all of the same kind of JSON data you would get if you were looking at this through Storage's diagnostics feature.
Yeah, massive new tooling for auditing and just checking what's going on in your workspaces. Just want to repeat the name, OneLake Diagnostics. If you're interested in learning more, just look up OneLake Diagnostics. We put out a bunch of docs and blogs and stuff like that on it, so you can check that out. I do want to get over to Bama's question because they've been waiting patiently. Does OneLake work with Lakehouse and Databricks too? So Josh as the person who gave the last Azure Databricks and OneLake presentation at FabCon. I'm going to put this over to you. Can you talk a little bit more about our integration with Azure Databricks?
Yeah, so there's a few ways to interpret that question. So we have the Lakehouse features within Fabric. I'll take it the way you said it. So yeah, does OneLake work with Databricks? There's a few options for using Databricks with OneLake today. If you're using Unity Catalog, we support Databricks mirroring to OneLake. And what that does is it'll replicate your catalog metadata over to OneLake. And since we're both using the same file formats, we're both using Delta Lake under the covers here, we don't have to copy any data or replicate any data. We just create shortcuts automatically and manage that for you. So your data is available within OneLake without any movement or duplication there. And then that data can be used downstream anywhere in Fabric, anywhere outside of Fabric that connects to OneLake. So bidirectionally, we're working with Databricks on getting that data, then getting Fabric data back into Databricks, similar to how we do for Snowflake. It's not fully there yet when you're using Unity Catalog, but you have some other options outside of Unity. You can connect through the storage drivers, the Azure Blob file system, ABFS. You can use that directly from notebooks to read data from OneLake. That's basically where we are now with Databricks.
Love it. Now I think there's always more things coming on the OneLake plus Azure Databricks. We're working closely with them. So, we're trying to build kind of the same interoperability we have with Snowflake. And I think that's definitely in the future. So keep checking back there. All right. I see a question from Daniel on OneLake security. So in OneSecurity, this kind of a two-parter. From OneLake catalog, I see only view users and view security roles, even if I'm an admin. I was wondering, the View Security Roles tab, since each workspace administrator can create and edit roles, this isn't centralizable, maybe with a naming convention for a tenant. Am I correct? I don't know if you follow that, Aaron. Can you address that?
Yeah, so all of the roles and permissions in Microsoft Fabric are going to be either at a workspace or like the OneLake security ones associated with an item. So a user will need to be an admin or member in that particular workspace in order to see the roles for that one. So if the question is, can I have a single sort of Uber tenant admin who has access to all of the OneLake security roles? Yes, if they're also a member of all of the workspace roles. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One, we don't want to give tenant admins the ability to access all the data because they might not need to. So they might have tenant admin jobs, and then you have other users that are configuring all of the actual day-to-day security tasks. And then we also want to make sure that you can have those admins who can go in, set the security, but only be scoped to their specific workspace boundary that you want them to have. So yeah, you can achieve it if you give that user access to every single workspace. Generally, it's not going to scale for larger organizations. So that's why we have it broken out where you can have just your admins for those specific set of workspaces.
I mean, the interesting thing about centralized role would, I kind of interpreted that as having one role that goes across multiple items, multiple workspaces. Is that something maybe DLP is a better use for, protection labeling?
Yeah, I think so. At least from the controlling access permissions across, your entire data estate, then some of the governance capabilities like DLP with sensitivity.
Yeah, so there's kind of two layers of protection here. So you can secure the data directly, which OneLake security gives you. That's very specific to your data. So you're going to secure these columns, these rows in this specific item, but it'll work anywhere when you go to use it. Then there's a broader strokes that you can get with data loss prevention, where you can say, all right, these types of data, things like PII or credit card information, you saw a little bit of that in the demo. I want to set a global policy for this, and it applies to the data no matter where it lives. You don't have to set data. You don't have to set rules specifically on different sets of data. The two kind of work together. Kind of one's a bottom-up approach where you're very familiar with the data and your security, and the other is kind of enforcing your corporate policies, your organizational policies, and they protect you from oversharing. So even though, let's say I granted Aaron access to certain data, but he's not allowed to see PII information, the DLP policies kind of override and take effect at that point. So the two work together, one globally and one more specific to your data.
Actually, on that Purview note, Benny Boy has a question around, sorry, love saying that name. Is there anything new I need to know about Purview admin to properly configure things in Fabric? So I think kind of there's two parts to that question. We don't have any Purview experts on this call right now, but I can certainly talk about what's new. I don't know if anybody can talk about the configuring things in the admin place, but just first on what's new for the Purview side. So we announced a few things last week. There's new things kind of always coming with Purview, but one was we GA'd how you can restrict access using Purview information protection labels in Fabric. So if something is highly confidential, you can kind of set restrictions based on the sensitivity label in Fabric. So that's super useful again. So if you set your lakehouse highly confidential, you can have access restriction based on that. We also GA'd data loss protection, something that Josh was just talking about, for a number of different sources in Fabric: lakehouses, semantic models, mirror databases, KQL, SQL. I think I'm forgetting some, but we GA'd DLP for a bunch of different data sources in Fabric. So that was really exciting. And then on the admin side, we also GA'd a couple new features as well, which is DSPM for AI, data security posture management for AI. We will have a long name at Microsoft, but that's really helpful. You actually saw it in the demo, which is if somebody is using Copilot and Power BI to try and get access to data that they're not supposed to, it will automatically flag that behavior. And also it integrates with insider risk in Purview. So you can track, say, if somebody is, has been recently laid off, maybe they're in their last 2 weeks of their job, they're quitting soon, and that's an added risk factor. And then they're also pinging Copilot and Power BI to get access to data that they maybe shouldn't, right? All of that will feed into what's called DSPM for AI and alert an Purview admin that something is potentially going wrong in their environment. So that went GA right before FabCon as well. We have insider risk management as well. That's part of kind of the overall DSPM story for tracking any risky behavior. And we have Purview auditing integration as well. And then the last thing is on the Purview data governance side as well. We integrate fully with them. So if you want to track your Fabric metadata and governance as part of your wider data estate, Purview data governance is awesome for that, right? You can track Fabric alongside M365, other catalogs like Unity catalog. All of that feeds into one central Purview data governance solution. Now, to your second question around how do I properly configure things so it's all set up in Fabric, I don't know if there's any Purview kind of experts here to tackle that. Does anybody feel comfortable enough to answer that? If not, we can maybe come back to you. Okay, great. Yeah. So sorry about that, Benny Boy. We'll hopefully get back to you. It's somebody who knows that well. Since we're a little out of questions, please keep putting your questions in. We'd love to answer them. One question I get a lot actually, and I got a few times at FabCon, was around pricing. And Elizabeth, I might ask you this, which is, can you talk a little bit about OneLake's pricing model, maybe the connection with ADLS, and also, why it's bundled with Fabric capacity and how you can kind of manage that, especially if maybe you're not as much of a Fabric user, but you do definitely want to use OneLake capabilities.
Yeah, great questions. Yeah, you hear like you have OneLake for your entire organization, for your entire tenant, but what we're actually doing is we're scaling up OneLake to meet your needs, and we're provisioning ADLS accounts behind the scenes for a workspace too. So if you're needing to have, like, for example, geo redundancy on one particular data set in one workspace, you can enable that on a capacity level, and then we'll make sure all of your data is stored in geo redundant storage accounts. But by default, everything is in zone redundant storage accounts. And so this is a platform that's designed to scale, and our billing model is also going to be familiar to those who are using ADLS. When it comes to the amount of data that you're storing is going to be showed as a line item for the amount of dollar cost per gigabyte stored in your capacity, and that will match the regional price of on par with ADLS at that point. But also, when you're accessing data, there is a transaction that's happening to read that data or write that data. And those transaction costs are going to be consuming the CUs from your Fabric capacity. So you don't have a separate line item for your data access. And this will mean that you can use the same capacity that you're using for your Spark, your pipelines, analysis services to be able to access your data in OneLake. So those are the two main components of your OneLake costs there, your data stored and your transactions. And if you want to pause your capacity but still be able to access your data, one thing you can do is you can have a capacity that's actively being used and shortcut to that data in the pause capacity, and then you'll still be able to read and write that data. So what that means is the consumer of the data is the one that is going to have those CU costs associated with it, not the owning capacity of the data, so that you can separate out the data owner and the charges from the data consumer and be able to pause the owning capacity if you need to help manage your costs separately and not worry about impacting downstream consumers at the same time. Yeah.
Love it.
So
Tom, I hope
that touched, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was perfect. Yeah. Thank you, Elizabeth. Tom, I saw you come off mute. Did you have anything to add there?
I was just going to say, I think that cross-capacity model is really helpful because you align your consumption with your transactions, and then you don't have all of your transactional cost being centralized somewhere who happens to own the data. And as you build this mesh of connected data products, you want people to consume it, but you don't necessarily want to pay for them to consume the data. So being able to consume it through shortcuts with the consuming capacity being able to pay means that you can create this data economy without having to worry about who's paying, which is, I think, pretty different to what I'm seeing others do.
Yeah, producer and consumer is amazing. You don't have to worry about, when you're producing data, all you have to do is worry about the capacity you need to produce it, and consumers can bring their own capacity to consume it. And that includes both the capacity needed just to access data from OneLake, but then the capacity needed to actually run an engine on top of it, like Power BI or Spark or SQL. And that can be the same capacity. So you don't have to think about, we talk about costs here. It's really, the cost is the capacity. That capacity we can use any which way. You're not paying separately for storage. It's all kind of rolled in together. You can use that capacity for everything.
Love it. And I see some more questions in the chat. I think Benny Boy and Daniel are absolutely crushing this for us. So I thank you. Thank you so much for putting your questions in there. First question, Benny Boy, on is there any guidance material I can follow to help me align with ISO 27001? The thing I would say there is we have a security white paper that you can use, right? And it has, it's very, very detailed on how exactly you can implement a secure estate. That would include guidance on using Purview. I think it has guidance on compliance. But if not, there are some compliance docs you can use as well to follow that. But the first step, definitely just check out the Fabric Security White Paper. It's just on Fabric documentation. You can download it. It's a super good resource. I know the folks who built it are working on updating it right now with the latest announcements as well. All right, and the next question, Daniel. So if the visibility is limited to workspace admins, if I need to answer a question like, can you tell me, Bob, which data has access, and our organization has 100 workspaces, and I'm an admin of 60 workspaces. I can only answer for my workspace, and I have to ask for the other workspace admins. Am I correct? Aaron,
that is correct. Because we want to make sure that the users who don't have access to those workspaces can't see security information for people in those other workspaces. So we're taking a look at this, seeing what we can do to kind of up-level it and get a way to answer this question. But the key is making sure that user is going to have the permission in order to do that kind of cross-workspace search, regardless of what permissions are going to be set on those other workspaces.
Yeah, and give us the feedback. We're always looking to see how we can evolve based on that. One of our goals here is to make sure you can have different parts of the organization working independently without having to have a central gatekeeper. But sometimes there's a need to have someone there who's at least providing a little bit more of the cross oversight. And if there's things we need to do to evolve there to give that picture to someone else, those are things we'd love to hear.
You can get some of that picture through OneLake Diagnostics, because you would be able to collect up all of the diagnostics data from all of the workspaces into a central workspace, and then at least see who is being able to access it, like retrospectively. So that might help.
Yeah, that's a great one too. So not only will it tell you, so versus telling you what theoretical access is set, it'll tell you what the actual access is and who's doing what, and it'll give you that fuller picture.
I think we only have 5 minutes left, so if you have any last questions, now is the time to ask them. One thing we haven't touched on yet is things that we talk about a lot, which is, how do you actually build your agents and make them data rich as you're building them? So we have obviously the tools at Microsoft like AI Foundry, Copilot Studio, and I'm curious, I saw some recent announcements around OneLake plus AI Foundry. Since Michaela isn't here, Josh, I'm wondering if you can kind of touch on those new announcements with AI Foundry, kind of the GA of our integration, and just more broadly, like how, if I want to build a data rich agent and I want to build it using OneLake, data from OneLake, how do I do that with Copilot Studio or AI Foundry?
Yeah, and there's 2 ways to really do it with AI Foundry. So what was announced was the GA of the AI Foundry connector for OneLake. So that gets Foundry access to all the data, structured, unstructured, that's in OneLake. And what's nice about connecting to OneLake, we talked about earlier, you can unify your data estate. So it's not just I'm connecting to one source or another. It can be a unification of different sources together. And that also, when you unify it, it adds additional context to that data. So I can put structured data next to unstructured data. That if it's related to go together, and I can put that all into the same, in our case, lakehouse, that can become your knowledge base within Foundry, and you can train your agents off of that data. That's one way that's now available in GA. The other option is also then to build data agents within Fabric. And those agents can then be called directly from Foundry, and they can be a source of knowledge there. So you have both options, and you can use actually both together. I think we showed a demo at FabCon where we had Fabric data agents who work really well with tables, structured data. And then we had data agents in Foundry who work really well with unstructured data. And then you can have one agent that talk to both and give you that full picture of both your structured and unstructured together within one agent. You have, like I said, multiple different ways here, but the whole story kind of comes together. So when you do that unification within Fabric, you can reuse that data within Foundry. The security that Aaron has been talking about, you can apply directly on top of that data, no matter where it's coming from, and all that kind of carries through, whether it's used within Fabric or used within Foundry or any other platform that's going to use from OneLake.
Nice. Actually, I have that demo, and I can play it in a bit. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but before I play the demo and maybe kind of close out this session, anything else that we didn't talk about that you guys want to touch on? All right, yeah. Let me find this demo because it's a very cool demo that we have from FabCon.
Please send me a message.
Give me 1 second. All right,
Now
and if
I'm
you
going to
put it back on the screen.
bring
There we go.
unstructured data into OneLake. OneLake isn't just for tables. It's built for files, images, PDFs, logs, anything really. I'll use blob shortcuts to point to an existing Azure blob container containing invoices in PDF format. Also for unstructured data, I am not copying. It shows up instantly in my lakehouse, side by side with my structured data, without spinning up pipelines or moving gigabytes of data around. OneLake is the unified lake for AI. Because everything lands in OneLake's open layout, I can use any AI tool on top of all my unified data, Fabric data agents, or external tools like Microsoft Foundry directly over the same data estate. Today, I want to add actions to my agents, so I'm using Microsoft Foundry agents. The benefits are simple. I can ask questions in plain language, attach knowledge so my agent understands my business, and set triggers so the agents can act. Integration is straightforward. In the Foundry agent knowledge experience, I point at my OneLake folders that include the unstructured blob shortcuts. For files, I enable indexing, so the agent can search across text and documents. It's a few clicks and the content is ready. Now I'm combining my unstructured context with my structured data agents. Since the data agent already unified all my structured data, my Foundry agents will now have complete access to my data in my organization relevant for the scenario. My Databricks mirror data, my JSON files from S3, my business data from the semantic model, and now also the invoices in PDF format. Here's the question I ask. Over the next 30 days, where might we sell out considering promos, returns, and deliveries? And what should we do to not run out of inventory? The agent searches the unstructured knowledge, joins it with the structured facts, and returns a prioritized list and recommendations. Now, to close the loop, I've set a trigger. When certain products are at risk, the agent automatically places an order with our supplier API or suggests a stock transfer, so inventory stays healthy without overfilling storage. And that's the value. OneLake unifies every kind of data, structured and unstructured, without copies. Any engine and any AI tool can use it within or outside Fabric, and Foundry data agents add actions, turning data into decisions.
All right, that was the last demo we had. I see one last question before we close this out from RP, which is, can we build agents in Fabric environment? Hopefully that demo answered your question, but essentially yes, right? We have data agents in Fabric, which allow you to add multiple sources from Fabric, whether you're working on a lakehouse or a KQL database, whatever it is, and create that data agent and ask questions about it. It will even show you the query it used to find the answer from your different data sources. And then you can connect that data agent to AI Foundry or Copilot Studio to then build that data-rich agent. Anything else people want to add to that one?
That's perfect.
Easy. All right, I think that's it for everything, but I want to thank everybody in the chat who asked their questions, everyone who just joined just to learn more about OneLake. We're always looking for questions and feedback on the product that we're putting out there. We want to make sure it's as good as possible. Also really want to thank the folks in the chat who've been answering questions this whole time. Matthew, Pramal, thank you so much for doing that. And then obviously to you guys for joining and answering questions. Josh, Elizabeth, Aaron, Tom, thank you all for joining. And with that, I think we can close it out.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you to our speakers. Our session is a part of a series. To register for future shows and watch past episodes on demand, you can follow the link on the screen or in the chat. We're always looking to improve our sessions and your experience. If you have any feedback for us, we would love to hear what you have to say. You can find that link on the screen or in the chat. We'll see you at the next one.